This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
We are at the end of the year.
Truth.
Like just about, which I can't believe.
Nope. Year went poof.
Yeah.
Absolutely went poof.
Really went by. Yeah, it did. So when we were thinking about what we wanted to record for this monthly episode, it came pretty clearly to both of us that we really felt called to record an episode all about how you may be feeling, how you may be coping after the election that took place in early November and what the election results were. So we're now at this point, right, this precipice. I can't remember. Maybe you know, Kate. I knew it a couple weeks ago, and now it's escaping me. The exact day that Trump takes office, I think, is January 21st.
Oh,
20th? Okay.
20th, 21st, or it's either 20th. Maybe the 20th is the last day or the first day, but yeah, you're right.
Somewhere around there?
Pretty sure it's the 20th. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the time that this episode's being released, I mean, we're at less than a month out before he takes office. And here's the thing that has become very, I think, important to me, and I'm going to speak for you, Kate, to you as well, which is that with Trump being elected, you know, therapists were really told that we're supposed to stay neutral on matters such as this, you know, politics, religion, et cetera, et cetera. Our clients should not know how we feel. Letting people know how we feel can, of course, be very polarizing because not everybody will inevitably feel or believe the same things that we feel and believe. And yet, this is such a time in our country with Trump being elected president once again that we cannot stay silent about. And it's something that we have no issues being very clear about where we stand.
Yes.
Which is that we feel all of the emotions that we are going to be talking about today in this episode about him being elected, right? Yeah. We feel fear, disgust, sadness, and anger about the outcome of this election for our country here in the U.S. I realize, too, as we're saying this, I'm like, well, we have a lot of listeners that aren't in the U.S., and yet you're probably aware of what's happening over here.
Right, and it's not like we don't have ripples, right? Where they're already talking about tariffs and other things that are internationally weighted, right? Unfortunately, America has such fucking weight to throw around that whoever's at the helm of our country matters outside of our country more than it does for many other countries.
Definitely.
Which is sometimes for the good, and I think coming up on for the very, very ill.
Exactly. Could swing either direction, right? Depending on who is president at any given time. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is that we're in this weird gray area now where he is not yet in office, but he is about to be. And that there is going to be, the way that I've explained it to my clients as they've been processing the election results, is that I kind of view it as like these three different phases, right? There was kind of this initial like numb period in like the immediate aftermath, like within the first like 1 to 3 days after the election for a lot of people, myself included, where it was just kind of like, this actually happened? What? And then, yeah, definitely feeling stunned. And then this period that we're in now, which is kind of all of these anticipatory things, right? Especially as it's come about recently about who he is going to have as members of his cabinet and things like that. Like, he's not in office yet, but he is going to be. And so there's a lot of building of these things of like what is going to come. And then there's going to be this next phase, which is after he actually takes office, when he will, inevitably, as any president does, he's going to start enacting policies and putting things on the table that he wants to happen and that he wants to change. And the things that we are looking at under a Trump presidency are terrifying, potentially. So we're well aware that we probably have we have listeners from all over the country. We have listeners in other countries and all of that. And so I know there may be a number of you listening to this where you're just kind of like, well, I voted differently than you guys. And if this is not the episode for you, that's fair. That's okay if this isn't the episode for you.
Yeah.
But we also know that there are a number of people who really did not want Trump to be reelected. And if that's where you are, this episode is for you. Because we want to be able to provide you with validation, and we also want to be able to talk about what is within your control for what you can do as you are going through all of these emotions, and will continue to go through all of these emotions to varying degrees at different points in time for, I hate to say it, but honestly, the next 4 years. And none of us have a crystal ball to know what's going to happen, but that's part of why we need coping skills now, is because we don't know. Mm-hmm. And so it's coming back to what can we do to take care of ourselves.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about today. And yeah, I'll do promotional stuff, and then I'll give you guys an idea of how we're going to structure this episode. The first thing, though, that I'll say, because this blends in nicely with promotion, is that, we have our other podcast, The Couch and the Chair. If you haven't already listened to it, I encourage you to do so. But I want to really mention something about The Couch and the Chair in alignment with this topic of coping after the election, which is that Kate and I recorded an episode for The Couch and the Chair. We recorded that episode before Election Day, so we did not know the outcome of the election at the time that we recorded it. But that episode specifically talked about how you can cope and manage having family members or just close people in your life, could be friends, could be significant others, whoever it is, where the two of you are on different ends of the political spectrum. And what you could do with that. So Kate and I share personally, because Kate has differing views from her dad. My whole extended family voted for Trump. Not my parents, not my brother, but everybody else in my family. And so we do a lot of personal sharing on The Couch and the Chair, but we also offer some suggestions and guidance on how you can navigate those relationships. So if you found yourself really struggling interpersonally with other people in your life since the election, I would recommend going over to The Couch and the Chair and listening to that episode, specifically because we're not really going to be talking too much today about the impact on relationships. That's just not going to be brought into this discussion. But that is all we talked about on that episode of The Couch and the Chair. So you could go and listen to that. If you have not yet ordered our book, go ahead and do that. We would love for you to order our book.
Time of the year.
I know, exactly, right? We're recording this for all of you in early December. I know once it's released, those holidays, I suppose, will be over. Just past, but
that's true.
What a bummer. But hey, if you have not yet purchased a gift for someone in your life, you can go ahead and do that. Or if you're wanting a good book to read in the new year.
Right. I was going to say to cope with the holidays afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, go ahead and order the book, DBT for Everyone. You can search for it on Amazon. You can consider becoming a patron if you haven't already. Or also, I guess this is in alignment with holiday stuff too, as I say at our Etsy shop. Great to order things from the Etsy shop for holiday things. You can get a jump start on your holiday shopping for next year from the Etsy shop. But those links are down in the show notes for the Patreon and for the Etsy shop if you want to go check either of those out. Give us a rating or write us a review on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate getting feedback from you guys on there. And you can rate us on Spotify as well, if that's where you're listening. And as always, we welcome questions, comments, feedback about anything by emailing us at dbtmepodcast@gmail.com. That's the best way you can reach out and get in touch with us if you need to about anything. So the way that the episode's going to look, to start it off, Kate and I are each just going to share a little bit personally about how we've been doing since the election results. And then I already named the emotions real briefly, but I'll name them again. We're just going to alternate talking about the 4 most common emotions that we think that people could be feeling after the election if you're struggling with the results, which would be fear, disgust, sadness, and anger. So we're just going to take turns talking about each of those emotions and really making sure that we're honing in on what you can do if that's the emotion that you're feeling, right? So coping with that emotion. How do you express it? What do you do with it? That's what we're really going to be diving into. So yeah, I will take a pause from talking because I've already been talking for quite a while. And I'll turn it over to you, Kate, to share how you've been doing since the election.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster. I really connected with what you're saying about how like there was a little bit of a period there with kind of some numbness right afterwards. Though also I will say that I don't know, here you go. While I both really like part of how I've been coping with it, I will also just out myself as saying I think at least initially I leaned a little too hard into the first skill I'm going to mention myself using as really a kind of like, nope, not going to look at or think about things, which is fine. Michelle's going to talk a little bit later about ostriching. But it was not so much deliberately mindful ostriching as it was like, look, I'm doing this totally healthy thing, right? Which was not quite entirely honest. Which was the M from improve is what I would say is the thing that I leaned on fastest and hardest at the start, right? So that is the meaning bit, making meaning. I don't normally do that quickly, but or at least that's how I think of it. Michelle, you feel free to chip in if your spidey senses about what different actions count as different DBT skills goes off about this looking like something else. But for me, it felt like the M and improve, which is that one of the first things I did was go about creating sliding scale down to free groups to offer through my clinic to my community. So an ongoing process group and a few different 4-week long groups actually dealing with these same emotions that we're going to be talking about tonight. I really wanted to be a place people could turn to. Like I wanted to turn myself and the clinic really solidly into resources. I also wanted to create those groups because I know as clinicians, we often feel better when we're doing things. So I wanted to be able to offer the clinicians who work for me the opportunity to lead these groups so they could feel connected with their community and like they were taking positive action. And so that's what I did for like the solid week afterwards. Like I did almost nothing but those groups for about a solid week. Creating the groups, creating marketing materials, marketing the groups places, like just fundraising for the groups, just doing all of this stuff because that was a narrow enough focus, I think, really, that I wasn't overwhelmed initially. I guess here you go. I think of that as sort of like a combination perhaps of the M from improve and the P from accepts of like push away, right? A little bit of like not now, but later. And that being said, I think it took, I don't know, probably 2 weeks, week and a half to 2 weeks before I would say I started to shift into the okay now, right? Like not now, but later. So I think the later showed up at around maybe 2 weeks post the election. It's funny, Michelle and I talk unsurprisingly a lot. And it was actually, and it was funny that I remember recording something for her about this the day that I had it. It sometimes I think having ADHD is a sort of sideways blessing, in as much as the fact that my mouth can outrun my brain is sometimes good for me, because it means my mouth alerts me to things that are going on that I'm not terribly consciously tuned into. And so I remember just driving down the road at one point, and I found myself saying out loud, "I'm not okay at all, but I'm doing a really good job of pretending." And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh shit, that's true. Like, that's accurate. I'm not okay at all. And that's, I think, when I started to be able to shift into more a lot. Wow. Try again, Kate. More into a place of a lot of self-soothing and working towards radical acceptance. I am not at radical acceptance, but I am working on it. I am turning the mind, right? You have to turn the mind again and again and again towards radical acceptance. Mm-hmm. So I am working on turning the mind consistently, I guess. God, I never think of that as a separate skill, but I suppose technically that's probably what goes in place of radical acceptance right now for me. Is the pre-radical acceptance step of like, no, I'm trying to head that direction. Even if I don't get terribly far down the road necessarily to start with. And then a lot of self-soothing, because, I mean, yes, I'm definitely feeling all of these things, but unsurprisingly for me, I think fear is probably the strongest. So how fun that I get to talk about it. And just a lot of fear for my communities. One of the things that I've been talking about with some folks, I know I mentioned it to you, Michelle, is that I'm aware that I'm incredibly privileged in so many different ways. But, one of the groups, communities, identities that I have is being part of the queer community. And I am well aware that I am the safest kind of queer there is, which is I am a white bisexual woman who is in a heterosexual seeming relationship, right? So, my hubby and I walk down the street and I pass as straight most of the time. And that gives me personally a bit of a, I don't know, guilty sense of safety, right? If that makes sense. Like, I wish that I could translate that safety to other members of my community who cannot camouflage so well. Because those are a lot of my clients and the clients of my clinicians, right? So I think one of the other things that's just tough for me in the position that I'm in is that it's, Michelle, you know how hard it is to be a clinician during really hard times, right? Like times that are just generally difficult. And because I have a bunch of clinicians working underneath me who I supervise, I get to sort of like, a lot of that rolls uphill, right? Like it's not just my clients, but it's sort of everybody's clients and the clinicians themselves, right? That are all sharing a lot of their fears with me. And so I'm just kind of swimming in it a lot right now. A lot of fear and sadness. For me, anger is harder to access a lot of the time. That's just me personally. I know plenty of people are fucking enraged. Leah, my newest clinician who is running the process group, called the process group, "Are you angry? Me too." Right? Like, I love that. So anyway, that's I think where I am. I'm in a place where I'm less ostrichy, not entirely not. But I'm starting to come back to those feels that I pushed away for those first couple of weeks so that I could really throw myself into being productive, right? And leaning on the sort of meaning part of things, perhaps a little over much. But I'm starting to have more of the feels be more front and center now. And working on, soothing them and turning towards radical acceptance, amongst the other things that we're going to talk about. But I just wanted to mention, I guess, the skills that I'm using that I don't think we talk about. Self-soothing. Yeah. Of course we talk about self-soothing, but the other ones I don't think I make on the list. How about you, Michelle?
Yeah. Let me think about what feels important to share. I guess where I'll start with, and I mean, you and I have talked about this a little bit, Kate, where you said at one point, this was, within the first couple days after Election Day, where you said something about how you weren't really like terribly surprised that he won.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess it feels important to name, I mean, Kate and I mentioned that, we're from Seattle, Washington, and that kind of a thing. But like, yes, we are in a very liberal part of the country.
Very progressive.
Where we live. Yeah, very progressive, very democratic, very blue, however you want to put it. And so I know, of course, I only really can see what's going on in my world, my little community that I live in here, and that there's a whole other, many other states and many other places where the vast majority of people voted for Trump, and that if I were to be transplanted into those communities, it probably then wouldn't shock me at all to know that he got elected, because it would just be abundantly obvious that most of the people you're walking past on the street are going to vote for him. But I really did not think he would be reelected. I really didn't. I thought that Harris had it in the bag. And the thing that I've, thought about many times, and again, I think you and I have talked about this too, is like, back in 2016, when he was elected, initially, I was just kind of like, well, he's an idiot. Like, why are we electing him? Like, why do people vote for him? He's a reality TV star from The Apprentice. Like, what? This makes no sense. He is not qualified to run our country. That's what I thought. And then in the 2020 election, when he was not reelected, it was just kind of like, oh, thank God, everybody's seen the light, and, all the things that started happening like earlier in 2020 with how he responded to COVID and how he responded to George Floyd's death and how he was just reacting to these things. I was just like, well, thank God everybody's really seeing how problematic he is. And so, we did not reelect him. And more problematic things have happened since. I mean, January 6th happened. And, now he's charged with multiple
felon.
Yeah, exactly. Multiple felony counts. Things have gotten even more problematic over the last 4 years. And so I didn't think there was any way that people would vote for him. I mean, of course, I knew millions and millions of people still would. I knew that. But I really did not think that he would win. And so, I was trying to stay up on election night and watch the results. But I stayed up long enough to where they were basically saying this is looking pretty likely that Trump is going to win. And I went to bed that night, secretly hoping that something would come through. And when I woke up that next morning and I looked at my phone and I saw that he did indeed win, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. And so I sat in the shock of that for a little bit, but go figure, that very morning, I had clients scheduled.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I see clients on Wednesday, election day was on a Tuesday. So I had people scheduled to see, and I did send out an email to my clients that morning letting them know that I was here for them to process the election results, and that it was a topic that I welcomed them bringing up in session, and that I was going to be there by their side to hold space for all of the emotions like that we're going to talk about today in the episode. And I was pretty clear. I said, I'm feeling these things too. I'm with you, right? I wanted my clients, because I'd had clients leading up to election day, whenever they would talk about feeling worried about, what if he gets, elected? and all of that, my clients would kind of always dance around it because they would, be like, well, I don't know where Michelle stands. And I would immediately make it clear. I'm just like, I'm with you. Like, again, this is not an issue that I'm going to stay silent about or be neutral about. I'm not going to be neutral about this man running, if you can call it that, our country. I'm just not. So yeah, I sat in shock for a little bit. And then I just realized, like, kind of like what you were saying with making meaning, Kate, of like, this, I think, really presents an opportunity for me to get some clarity around what I want activism to look like for me. And actually doing something. I still have not settled yet on what that something is. I mean, I lead a very full life being a mom of 2 young kids and, running my own practice and stuff. I don't have a lot of spare time on my hands. So I don't know what it looks like. But that is what's really been on my mind a lot since. And I think that is very much in line with Improve and very much in line with contributing from Accepts. Is that's where my head has been at, is thinking about those things. And also just, I have a feeling it's definitely going to change after he is in office and after, the first terrible restrictive policy goes into place that will be terrible for, women and or the LGBTQ plus community and or people of color or whatever it's going to be, then it's going to shift again. But I've just kind of been in this place of like, okay, he's not in office yet. He's not in office yet. He's not in office yet. A little bit. And I've really been working with my clients on, because most, if not, well, not all, but many of them have processed the aftermath of the election results with me a little bit. And they keep coming back to the same question, which is just like, what do I do? Right? Like, how... I can't just act like this is okay. And they're meaning less about like, what do I do from an activism standpoint, and more about like, just what do I do with myself? How do I get through the day when I'm thinking about this stuff? Again, we're going to be talking about it today in this episode. But really a big thing that I've been talking about with them and like validating for them is that it's okay to, as Kate said, this is the term I've been using, is that it's okay to ostrich. Like, it's okay to have times where you're like, I'm going to put my head in the ground and pretend this isn't happening for a little while. That's okay. I've been doing some of that. And sometimes people feel a lot of guilt when they do that. They're like, thinking to themselves, well, I should be doing more than I am. And if I just, pretend that this isn't happening, then that's a problem. But I told one of my clients, I was just like, you need a break from thinking about it. Go watch a movie with a friend. Like, go do something to get your mind off something else or onto something else and off of this. And especially, with us recording this episode right now in early December, I'm really looking forward to this holiday season with my family. My son just turned 3. His birthday actually was on Election Day. Funny enough. And he's such a fun age. And so for me, I'm just like, nope, I'm focusing on my little world right now. I'm focusing on being a mom. I'm focusing on my kids' needs. I'm focusing on kind of just what's right in front of me every single day. And I know that these larger things are happening. And it is scary when I pause and really take a look at it. When I hear, who he's putting in his cabinet and all of this stuff. And I know it's going to come in waves, right? Like there's going to be these times where it's like, yeah, those couple days where he was making all the announcements about who was going to be in his cabinet, it was like everything kind of flared up emotionally a little bit. And then now temporarily it's kind of died back down. And I know it's just going to go in waves like that. Again, for years. For the next few years, it's going to go like that. So I'm just trying to appreciate for myself the times where I'm like, okay, he's not doing anything right this second that I know of. Okay. It will come to light when, again, the certain policies go into place or whatever. And at that time, I will feel my feels about it. For right now, I'm just going to focus on me and my life. And that's what I can do. So that's where I've been at with things. But yeah, I can't even believe it's been, again, at the time that we're recording this in early December. As of today, when we're sitting here, Kate, it's been less than a month. It feels like it's been a year.
Well, and it's interesting, Michelle. I was reflecting as you were talking about something I hadn't thought to share, but I do think is kind of interesting is, obviously I myself am a part of, and my clinic entirely, focuses around certain, marginalized communities. But I just love this phrase. Sorry. I have some straight friends, sorry, I have to use that phrasing because it's too funny, but straight family members. And it's just been really interesting to me to notice. It's obviously not 100% divide because that's silly, but by and large, no one that I can think of that I've interacted with that's in the queer or like POC community that I've talked to has been surprised. Where it's mostly been the straight white women I know.
No, it's fair.
Who were like, what?
I'm in my bubble.
Like, oh, sweetie, you're not used to being hated everywhere you go, are you? Like, those of us who are used to being hated everywhere, we're like, yeah, of course. Yep. That was what's going to happen, right? Anyway, I just thought that was interesting to observe in my world. Like the people who are like, what? And then people were like, yep. Was just really pretty clearly demarcated around marginalization.
That's such a good point, because I mean there's so much privilege that I hold, and that through my own lens, my own privileges, that I just thought justice would prevail. Yeah. And that for marginalized groups, maybe in a way it's like, better.
Exactly.
Or you know that like, nope, the shitty thing is gonna
It's pretty fucking likely.
Because the shitty thing tends to happen for a very, very, very long time in history.
Yep.
Before justice actually, prevails to be what it should be. Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, it was just something
that's a good thing to point out.
That was interesting. But speaking of, let's move into my personal quote unquote favorite emotion show.
Yeah, let's get going on our 4 emotions.
By favorite, I just mean if I default into one wedge of the emotion wheel, it's pretty consistently fear as my like heightened emotion if I fall in one direction or another. So what do you do with it, right? Like, I do first of all want to say, this is, I don't know, kind of a cool opportunity generally right now, because a lot of times when we, and I'm speaking for myself as well as many others, experience fear, it's not actually commensurate to what's going on, or it's kind of apropos of nothing, or, there's things where it maybe doesn't quote unquote fit the facts if we're going to use, like DBT terms. But that a lot of the fear that we're experiencing now does, and we get to sort of utilize the fear more consistently, like for what it's used for biologically, which is kind of nice. So just a sort of side effect of like, you can actually sometimes feel this fear and use it the way fear is meant to be used, to help you be prepared and grounded and aware of things. And one of the ways to do that is to talk about it, right? With a trusted other, that phrase that Michelle and I like to use a lot, right? So if you are able to sit and share about your fears with another person, it doesn't like instantaneously diminish them, but it helps you have comfort and company in them. And it can help you sort out what actions might you actually be able to take? How can you utilize this fear potentially to help you be prepared, help you be more connected to your community, help you take action around what is meaningful to you. But we'll get to that a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Also part of talking about it with a trusted other, sort of. I don't know. I'm trying to make this attached to here because I didn't want to add another bullet point. There you go. That's just honesty. I was trying to avoid another bullet point for some reason. I don't even know why. But I also think cope ahead is a really good skill to mention under fear. Especially, Michelle, the reason I thought about it actually was in your intro. You were talking about being in the sort of state of being in an anticipatory kind of place. Mm-hmm. Right? That, well, certainly some of these emotions are about things that are in fact happening in the here and now. A lot of them are in that more sort of anticipatory, looking forward at events thing. And I was like, we have to mention cope ahead if we're in that like anticipatory space, right? Because like what are you going to be doing if you're in this country on January 20th, right? Do you want to make sure you're disconnected? Do you have self-soothing stuff that's available to you? Like, how do you want to move through that day? And can you utilize cope ahead as a way to try and help yourself have a better time when the day actually comes? So I just wanted to make sure cope ahead got a mention because especially when we're in that anticipatory fear state, it can be something that's really helpful because it helps us feel prepared and because it is helping us be prepared. So I thought that was one that was important to mention. If your fear is really peaking out, right? Like we're at panic attack kind of places, we're at struggle functioning kind of places. That's the place to do more of a physical release of this, right? This looks a lot like TIP. I would say most especially the temperature and the intense movement, intense exercise. How do they actually phrase it? Intense exercise, isn't it? They use that word.
I think they do say exercise.
Anyway, but intense movement, right? Is the two that I would recommend from that family, most specifically. And the last thing I would say is this sort of combination of checking the facts and opposite action, right? Which are always good to do together anyway. The reason I think about check the facts is for myself. It's something that I don't know. Michelle, you tell me if you think this is something other than check the facts. But one of the things that it's tempting to believe and feel the emotional repercussions of as though it were true is this emotion-based thought of half of my country would rather I were dead. Right? Mm-hmm. Half of my country would rather I cease to exist. Right? Like that is a thing I kind of wake up to. Like that's a place my brain goes default. Like, it's too black and white. There's no dialectics in here, which is a first clue to the fact that it's not accurate, right? But the emotion mind space here for me is half of my country would rather I were dead, right? Like that's the emotion mind space, and I really needed to spend some time sort of, I would say, checking the facts and regrounding myself in the fact that nothing is that straightforward, right? It's not every single vote for Trump came with the backed up thought of, and death to the queers, right? Like that's just not true. And I know that, right? Reason mind knows that it is not factually true that everyone who voted for Trump is coming after the queer community with pitchforks and, torches. There we go. My brain can think of the right word. And so I need to work on checking the facts and helping myself get into sort of a more wise mind state, I guess I would say, around what it is. Like, yes, there are very real threats to my community that are part of this. And yes, it is sad to realize how many people are at the very least okay with voting for a man who has said and done some pretty horrifying things towards and about my community. But it's not a one-to-one that whoever voted for Trump wants me dead, right? Like, that's just not true. And then leaning into opposite action as a way to take the commensurate fears, not the everyone wants to kill me fears, but the nah, shit actually is likely to go down this pretty bad kind of fears, and channel them into action, right? Fear tends to have us run away from things, but this gives us an opportunity to run towards things that can feel meaningful. So This is about taking action around what you're scared of happening, right? So you can give to Planned Parenthood if you're worried about access to abortion being further restricted. You can give to, places that support the POC communities, who support the LGBTQIA plus communities, who you can write a letter to your local and state representatives, right? And trying to get more involved in your government in your area, right? There's lots of different ways that you might be able to step forward in a way that feels more empowered as opposed to running away from whatever it is that you're frightened of. Nice dangling preposition there. God, I hate ending on prepositions. Oh, well.
Yeah, awesome. So the next emotion we're going to be talking about is disgust. And disgust is one where I think disgust gets overlooked a lot.
Me too.
I mean, admittedly, when I think about, past podcast episodes, it's almost one that I never name out loud, or even when I'm talking with my clients, I'm like, you might be feeling an uncomfortable emotion like fear, sadness, or anger. Like, I don't talk about disgust. And one of the things, I was actually thinking about this. So we can include a link to this book in the show notes if you guys are interested in it. But there is a children's book. We have it in my household. My son loves it. And it's called Marlon Bundo. Do you know about Marlon Bundo, Kate?
Yes, I do know Marlon Bundo. Okay.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know about Marlon Bundo, it's a children's book about, just the summary of it is that it's two gay bunnies who meet and fall in love. But there is a stink bug. And the stink bug represents the president, specifically represents Trump. And it's pretty clear. There's, little messages in the book that are kind of, more geared towards adults. Not inappropriate, but just that only adults would understand. And the stink bug says that they can't get married. But then all their animal friends remember that they can vote on who is in charge. And they vote to not have the stink bug be in charge anymore. And then the two bunnies get married. And that's how the book ends. And it says, stink bugs are temporary. Love is forever.
Aww.
And Noah happened to choose this book this was the bedtime story he wanted to read a day or two after election. And I got to that last page and it just hit me in all the feels where I'm like, that's right. Okay. Stink bugs are temporary. I need to remember that. But the reason why I'm bringing this up in the context of talking about disgust as an emotion is because if you look at in this book, how that they chose a stink bug as the animal to portray the president. They even say it the stink bug. I basically have this book memorized. I've read it so many times, but it basically says let me tell you a little bit about the stink bug. He was stinky and, blah, blah, blah. All this, but it really invokes that feeling of disgust a little bit with the choice of that animal to represent Trump. But when it comes to just experiencing disgust, sometimes, of course, it can be really obvious or in our face, unavoidable, where we come into contact with something that physically disgusts us, right? Which might lead to us gagging or vomiting or that kind of a thing. But there can be a level of emotional disgust that we don't really talk about very often or look at, where you can feel this sense of being repulsed or just a strong aversion to what somebody is saying or doing, right? You just get this ick feeling about the person. You're just ugh, I can't stand being around this person, right? That's you experiencing disgust. And when it comes to experiencing this after the election, of course you can experience it about different things. Yes, one could experience disgust about Trump as a person, which I feel often happens to me if I am watching a speech of his. I'm just sitting there and I'm not even consciously aware of the face I'm making, but it's probably a face that looks like a disgust face. But this can also be I'll just speak for myself. Primarily, it's been feeling disgust that, again, so many people voted for him. Like if I'm driving through my city and I see trucks with, a Trump flag on the back of it, yeah, I feel disgust. I feel disgusted that person would vote in that way, and be so overt about it when, like you've been talking about, Kate, as a queer person, like that is scary. When you see symbolism like that makes it so explicit of like, these are, I hold these values that led me to vote for him.
Yeah.
That we can't know exactly what those person's values are or what the exact reasons are for them voting for him. They're blasting it from the rooftops that they did. So what do we do when we feel disgust in situations like this? So, with all of these emotions, we wanted to talk about when you really feel them physically in your body, what can you do with that? So like for fear, Kate talked about how you can use tip. With disgust, I didn't really think about like a DBT skill, but I think it's important to start to really like notice and be in touch with what that feels like in your body, because it tends to be more subtle. And depending on the degree to which you feel it, if we are really feeling disgust physically or emotionally, I mean, that can manifest as vomiting. Like it can get to that point. And if you notice that for yourself, where you're just kind of like, I feel like I'm going to throw up, or I've lost my appetite, or, again, I just feel kind of, about it, right? Like, if you need to, it sounds kind of gross. If you need to release, though, release, right? Like, if you're like, I feel like I'm going to go throw up, go and do that. Like, get it out of your body. Or again, just like if you notice that it's kind of like a facial expression, or even like I'm noticing as I'm talking about it, you all can't see me, but like my shoulders are going up a little bit. That's a way that it's like physically manifesting for me. Like rather than trying to tell yourself that you're not supposed to feel that way, no, just like let yourself feel it for a little bit. Like if your face wants to kind of like distort in the way that our faces do when we feel disgust, okay, don't try to censor yourself. Just, let your body physically feel it to the degree that it wants to, and then it's more likely to pass through quicker. Something else that I thought was important with this is, depending on, again, what triggers disgust for you, but if you find yourself consuming media in some way, shape, or form, you are watching the news or reading on, social media, posts that have been made, or however you get your political content, and you are coming across things about what Trump is doing and what's happening in the world, and you notice yourself feeling that feeling of disgust, I want you to really practice some mindfulness of that when you are engaging in media. Admittedly, I am a person who, this isn't great. I mean, talk about ostriching, but like I really try to avoid as much as I can watching the news in any way, shape, or form. Like I just, I don't want to know so much of the time what is happening in the world.
I can
but
only
it's
consume it in
unavoidable.
comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You can either, intentionally decide what you're going to consume, but no matter what, there may be times where it catches you off guard, right? Because we can't avoid it entirely. And so what would be great is if you're able to really be mindful and selective about, okay, when do I carve out space to engage with political content? What does that look like for me to do? And how can I do that in a way where I'm staying aware of what's happening, but it's not tipping me over into a place of disgust, emotional overwhelm, all of that. So that's going to require you to be checking in with yourself and really being, kind of mindfully focused on that experience, right? When you are consuming Political content, consume political content, right? As it says, like when you're walking, walk, when you're eating, eat, when you're like, just try to focus on that as much as you can so that when you're doing that, you can be in touch with the emotions that you're experiencing. And if you have the experience where, again, it just comes at you, right? You're just scrolling through Facebook and one minute you're looking at your friend's cute puppy, Kate. Kate makes posts about her puppy. And then the next minute you're scrolling through and there is a link to, like some article about what Trump recently did. You're like, huh? Right? And that kind of thing. It can come at you out of the blue. But before you stop to click on anything, be mindful. Do I have the bandwidth to look at this right now? Does this serve me to look at this right now? What was my initial gut reaction the moment that I read that headline or saw that picture or whatever it was? If I felt disgust, let me proceed with caution. Doesn't mean don't look at it, but just I want to be mindful as I look at this. So that's going to be really important because disgust can sideswipe us, I feel like, where we don't see it coming, but it can come on really strong, really fast as an emotion. And then if needed, to be honest, this is not necessarily the way that stop was intended as a skill. Stop was designed so that if you are about to engage in a problem behavior, as DBT puts it, that you don't engage in the problem behavior because you will stop, take a step back, observe, and then proceed mindfully before you do something that could have consequences that you might later regret. So I'm not talking about using stop for that reason, but I like the elements of stop when it comes to the emotion of disgust. Because if you notice yourself starting to feel disgust, you may want to stop, take a step back from the thing that is leading you to feel disgust, observe what's going on for you, and then proceed mindfully about whether you want to re-engage with that thing or whether you want to, stop engaging with it entirely. So the elements of it, I think, can be really helpful, even if I'm taking that skill and putting it in a situation where it wasn't really meant to be put in. As far as proceeding mindfully goes, though, it could look like actually then turning to a skill like ABC, where it's going to be important because what tends to, again, elicit emotional disgust from us is when we are seeing somebody do something or say things that are just totally against our values. Generally speaking, that's what's going to make us feel emotionally disgusted. It's just like, how could you think that? How could you say that, right? That's just so wrong. That's just so gross. That's just so inappropriate. Fill in the blank here. And so getting back in touch with your own value system and coming back home to yourself after witnessing or being involved with a situation or a person that was saying and doing things so out of alignment with your values that led to you feeling disgust, that could be really helpful to come back home to yourself. And a great skill to do that is ABC. I mean, really any element of it, I think. We already talked a little bit about cope ahead, but especially with the A, either short-term positive experiences, long-term positive experiences, building mastery with something that's important to you, like just really making sure that you are able to reattune and engage in activities that are not going to bring you to a place of disgust and that will start to bring in more joy to you. Can be really helpful because, again, we want to just be very mindful about when you are starting to experience disgust, keeping yourself in that situation for too long can be really toxic. It is something where by and large, you're going to want to look at removing yourself from the source of the disgust as much as you can. And then you want to move towards, doing something along the lines of ABC. What about you, Kate? Moving into sadness.
Yes.
For the next one.
With the brief visit to fear. You're talking about the like how to physically release stuff, and I realized that tip is all well and good, for fight or flight, and does not. I have found does not always do as much for me, who is in the more firmly in the freeze category, as other things may. And so I just wanted to put it out there that if you have the opportunity to allow yourself something like, I don't know, okay, I'm just going to out myself. This is a thing I find pleasant, weird way of putting it. This is a thing I find helps me move fear through my body. There you go. Is like allowing myself sometimes things like turning off the lights in my walk-in closet and curling up in a corner underneath some clothes, basically. Like just like burrowing, making a little hidey hole. Right? Right, going and being in a hiding kind of space, more in the freeze space, right? If that's the way your body is inclined to embody fear. I just want to say that there are spaces and ways to accommodate that bodily inclination as well. If you're not someone who necessarily finds that fear drives as much physical motion and activity, but is more of a shut down space. So you talking about that reminded me of it, Michelle, and I thought that was a point worth revisiting.
Yeah, definitely.
So sadness ought not to surprise many people that self-soothe is the first thing that comes to mind for me with this one, right? Self-soothing is so much about self-kindness, right? And while we'll talk a little bit more about some ways to potentially interact with other people around your sadness, we can't always have other people, right? Maybe no one is home right in the moment. Maybe we don't have access as much to community or to relational resources. And so how can we bring kindness and compassion and tenderness and care into our own spaces for ourselves? And self-soothing, I think, is really one of the best ways to act in alignment with that idea. Right, like, so self-soothe, we've talked about it ad nauseum, but just a brief reminder, again, that it's okay to return to things that were soothing in childhood, right? I think there can be a weird sort of like embarrassment or shame associated with soothing ourselves in ways that are associated with being a child. But that's societal silliness, especially if you're doing it in the privacy of your own home, right? So go ahead and snuggle your stuffed animals, right? Drink warm milk, listen to lullabies, right? Like do the things that are soothing to babies and toddlers and children, because those are the things that are soothing to us on a basic level, right? As opposed to more intellectually based soothing kinds of things. So just self-soothe, I would say, is the first, not first stop, but the first thing I think about for sadness. In alignment with the wow, I cannot speak. In alignment with physically releasing, there you go, the emotions like we've been talking about with the other two so far. Crying is a great way to physically release sadness, right? And now, depending on how sad you are, this could look like everything from just allowing yourself to leak a bit, like a faucet in need of tune-up, all the way to like ugly crying, right? Weeping, wailing, right? Like fucking crying, right? I've done a couple of those moments. I've had some weeping episodes when I let myself go there since this started. So just letting it show up, right? We often shut down tears. I would say that that's a pretty common response. If there's like, well, this isn't a good enough reason, or what's the point, or I don't quite know why I'm wanting to cry in this moment, right? Maybe my sadness is more under wraps and I'm not aware of it, but it's there in my body. So just a deep encouragement to allow, sadness to show up and manifest in the ways that it wants to in your body, including crying. This can also look sort of like some of the self-soothing things, right? Sometimes embodying sadness means things like curling up in the bed, right? Drinking warm beverages, kind of slowing down, right? Doing less. Is a way to remind our bodies and ourselves to chill a little bit. And last but not least, if you have any trusted others in your world where you can get this, asking for touch from other humans can be pretty freaking healing, right? We are, what's the word I want? Group? Nope. I mean, yes, social. There we go. We are social animals by nature, right? That's the hardwiring. We're meant to be together, especially in hard times. We are meant to gather. We are meant to be together. We are meant to be interdependent during those sorts of times. So if this could be as simple as someone just putting their hand on your shoulder or on your leg, all the way to, if it's an intimate enough relationship, being literally held, right? Be that being hugged or cuddled or held in someone's lap, right? Our bodies can often crave that kind of external soothing when we're in a state of sadness. And if you have the opportunity to afford yourself that, I highly encourage it. I know it's not always a thing we're encouraged or give ourselves permission to ask for, is that kind of physical comfort. But if you can and you have a resource in your world, I highly suggest leaning into that for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, we're on to the last one, which is anger. Woohoo! Dun, 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 dun. It's funny talking about anger because I didn't mention this to you, Kate, before we started recording, but that was literally what my entire therapy session was about today.
Look at you, you're on the ball.
Personal therapy. Yes, lots of thoughts about anger at the moment. So I have my own personal therapy sessions every week before we podcast. So, sometimes that stuff stays on the brain as we go into recording. But when it comes to anger, actually, a lot of this stuff is what I was talking about in my own therapy today, because anger is one of those emotions that I feel pretty uncomfortable with. I feel far more comfortable expressing or allowing myself to feel the other three things that we have talked about today rather than feel anger. And one of the things that was coming up in my therapy session that I'll share with all of you is that my therapist and I were talking about how, we don't even realize this is what's happening, but we historically as a society, we have not really taught children what to do when they feel angry. So often the matter of course has been, okay, if there's two kids playing together and one kid takes the toy and then you hit that kid because you want your toy back, basically the focus is on, well, you should not have hit. That is bad that you hit. That's not what you do. It may be corrected to be like, okay, how do you use your words to tell them that you want the toy back? Or, you need to go sit in timeout for a little bit so that you can calm down before you come back to playing because you hit and hitting is not okay and all of that. But so rarely are we actually telling kids, it's okay that you feel angry that they took your toy. Not okay that you hit, but I totally get why you feel angry about that and why you want your toy back. Of course you do. We don't validate anger. And so this starts when we're very young. There's a whole lot of us walking around this world, myself included, where it's just kind of like you weren't ever taught what to do with it. You weren't taught that it's okay to feel it. And you weren't really shown that, you can express that. This is how you do it. No, it just didn't happen. But I'll talk a little bit about general things with anger, and then more specifically anger pertaining to the election and what you do with that. I think one thing though that's important to keep in mind is that anger is a spectrum. On the mild end of anger, you have words like irritated, annoyed, that kind of a thing, all the way ranging up until saying that you feel rage. Kate, I think you already used that term once today. Yep, I definitely had a client tell me in session, I feel rage about this, right? And again, rage is not bad. Rage is not unhealthy. It's all about, what are you doing with that? So when it comes to anger, and I think what so many of us fear when it comes to the idea of expressing anger is that we are just worried that we're going to lose all control, that we're going to say or do things that are out of alignment with our values, that are really going to wind up hurting someone else or hurting ourselves or destroying something that deep down we really don't want to have destroyed, but we're just going to destroy it. And yeah, like a fit of rage or that kind of a thing. And my therapist was talking to me today about how you can and probably often do feel anger without aggression. The two are not synonymous, right? You can feel a lot of anger without being aggressive. And even when people are aggressive, it doesn't always mean that they're necessarily feeling anger. They might be feeling a lot of fear or something else, So that was an interesting way to think about it. But it's okay and healthy to be somewhere on the anger spectrum. Now, skills-wise, if you are seriously having urges to hurt yourself, someone else, or property, then you want to bring in some opposite action. That is what it is there for, so that you don't wind up doing those things. But another thing that my therapist said today, which I was like, I really like that idea, because when it comes to destroying property, there are absolutely ways that you can do this that are not going to have consequences. This is why we talk about hitting a pillow. I mean, that poor pillow is just, oof, sorry, pillow, but the pillow's going to be okay, right? Or I've talked with clients about ripping up paper. That can be a really accessible, easy thing to do. My therapist today talked about buying dishes from Goodwill. Just getting cheap dishes from a thrift store that you can go somewhere where you can smash those things and not actually risk hurting yourself. And you're not actually breaking a plate that you really, use all the time or that has sentimental value or anything like that. You're breaking plates that you spend $2 on. So what? So there's definitely an asterisk with the destroying property or hurting property. You may find ways to do that are totally healthy and okay and not going to have long-standing consequences. So you want to physically release your anger in a safe way. It is also safe and okay to yell. A common thing that I recommend to my clients is to, find a place where they are alone. I will often recommend the car, and yell. Yell, scream. You might be screaming words, or you might just be screaming. Either is okay. And again, if you have a trusted other where you're just for a minute, can I just really unleash and just yell and just have you be here to hold space for me? Fantastic. But if you don't have that person, there are ways you can get creative to find that space and opportunity. So that's anger, generally speaking, of things you can do with it. But when it comes to the election, the thing about anger is that it comes up as an emotion we experience because a boundary is being violated and we feel the need to protect ourselves. Either our own boundaries being violated and we want to protect us, or we see someone else's boundary being violated and we're pissed off about them being hurt or harmed in some way and we want to protect them. That's what it's about at baseline, anger is. So when we're thinking about this on the scale of the election results and all that there is to fear and worry about when it comes to either personal rights potentially being taken away or rights of people we love and care about being taken away. Yeah, the best thing we can do to protect ourselves or other people is to take action. Going all the way back to the beginning of the episode, Kate, you gave an amazing example of how you just kind of like knew in your bones that you're just like, I need to start a group.
Yep.
I need to create a space.
Yeah, the very next day I created a 4-week curriculum in like 4 hours.
Yep, you just took all that like energy and you just channeled it, right? So anger is amazing for getting us to actually do things. Like, sorry, sadness, you are not the emotion for that. And disgust is typically all about like avoiding, right? Like, I just want to get away from that thing or that person. But anger is like, no, let's do something. Let's get in there. Let's get messy. Let's make something happen because I'm not going to let this fly because I'm pissed and this isn't okay. So now is a great time to channel anger into taking action. And, advocating to whatever degree that you can in whatever way that you want to. How I see this falling in line with DBT is that if we think about like check the facts and the questions that it asks on the check the facts worksheet, one of the questions is, what is the catastrophe? And the follow-up question to that is, imagine yourself coping with it. Like, basically, what are you going to do if the catastrophe happens? Mm-hmm. Ironically, I have been doing some pretty intense, like, DBT coaching work with a client of mine where every week we're just picking a different skill to work on. And the week before the election, the skill she and I had been working on was check the facts. And so she showed up to her session the day after election day. And I just basically told her, I was like, look, if you want to do DBT today, we'll do DBT today. If you want to just talk about other things, we can talk about other things. And she had a lot to say about the election and a lot of fears and, all of this. And so, but she told me, she was like, I did a check the facts worksheet about if Trump gets elected. And my emotions do fit the facts. Mm-hmm. And I was basically like, yeah, they do. Yeah. Like, yep, 100%. But there is that space on there that I think is so important, is like for so many people, Trump being elected is a catastrophe. So now what? This is where it comes a little bit, I guess, bringing some degree of radical acceptance in, which is like,
it happened.
For better or worse, this is what's happening to our country. So what can we do as this catastrophe is unfolding? That's really the question to ask yourself. And your anger may actually have a lot of wisdom to share. Kate, you also did a really nice job when you were talking about fear of like talking about, well, this is what my emotion mind says. Yep. This is what my reason mind says, that kind of a thing. We do not want anger to be solely running the show. Good God. Like, I think you were even saying something for yourself, but I think this was before we started recording, where you were like, yeah, if I had my way anytime that I saw anybody with like a Trump sign there or anything, I would just walk onto their property and just take it off.
Yeah, just destroy it. Yeah, fuck it.
I would just destroy it. Well, okay, then you get a trespassing charge.
Yep, so, exactly. Destruction of property, all sorts of nasty shit.
All sorts of things, yeah. So we don't want, again, anger to be calling all of the shots. But we also don't want to exile it. It's here for a damn good reason. We want to hear what it has to say. Doesn't mean we're going to do what it's telling us to do, but we want to hear what it has to say. That's really important. And then I thought of another DBT skill that I think also is very appropriate for the times that we are in, which is alternate rebellion. A skill that we don't really come back to talking about very often. No. But if you have not heard our episode about it, you can go all the way back. I looked up the date to May 31st, 2023. That was when we recorded an episode about what alternate rebellion is. But if I go basically off the top of my head to give a brief summary of the skill, alternate rebellion was created because in the second edition of the DBT Skills Manual, there's a whole section all about like drug and alcohol use and addiction and sobriety and like how you can use DBT to help you, get sober and maintain sobriety. An alternate rebellion was a skill created for people struggling with addiction. Because if somebody has been living life in such a way where for a long time, anytime they would, I don't know, you have a bad day, you use. You have a good day, you use, right? That like you've been engaging in things for a long time when you've been in this state of addiction where you've probably been rebelling against what's been expected of you by society. Just by virtue of using any illegal substance, that's, rebelling. And now it's about, okay, I want to make sure that now that I'm not relying on this, addictive behavior anymore, how am I moving through the world in such a way where I feel like I'm like living authentically and I'm not like putting myself in any kind of box or anything like that, but I'm also making sure that I'm doing things legally, but finding a way to like engage in that part that we all have. We all have it inside of us. Some people very small, some people very big, but where we want to break the rules. We want to do what we want to do and fuck everything else that says we shouldn't. Like we have that. We have that in us. And alternate rebellion gives you ideas about how you can do that in a way that's going to be like safe and non-harmful to you or other people. If I'm remembering off the top of my head, maybe you can remember things too, Kate, but I know I talked about like, dyeing your hair, getting tattoos. Like,
yep.
Yep. But I think it really did talk specifically about like political rebellion.
Anyway, yes.
Oh, going barefoot. Yeah, that's definitely your alternate rebellion, right? But yeah, making sure that you are taking action and using your voice to make a statement about what's important to you. And you can absolutely go against the grain. There's something really helpful and healing actually about going against the grain and being, again, your most authentic self, even if that is really outside the box and not what people expect typically. That kind of energy is, I think, what is so needed with where we are right now. So yeah, look up alternate rebellion. Dive into it a little more. Go back and listen to our episode on it. Or again, if you just Google any DBT skill, you'll get tons of resources.
That's true.
To explore what that can look like for you in these times. But yeah, it's a great skill to use when you might be feeling some anger about something. But you also want to make sure that, again, you're not veering off into unhealthy territory land.
Territory land.
Territory land. That was a bit redundant, wasn't it?
Yes, as my father always used to say, it's the Department of Redundancy Department.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I think we're ready to wrap up with closing moment.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I hope it goes well for folks. It always cracks me up, Michelle, that I like doing these, considering I can't do them. Anyway, it's just funny to me. Okay. Go ahead and get into a comfortable position, whatever that looks like for you today. Sitting, standing, laying down, walking. Whatever feels good and right in your body. And if you feel safe and comfortable doing so, I invite you to go ahead and close your eyes. To begin with, we're going to start by just noticing our breath. You don't need to breathe any more slowly or any more deeply than you do naturally. It's just about tuning in, about really leaning in and noticing the rhythms and the sensations of your breath and letting them welcome you into your body and into the present moment. So I'd like you to begin this visualization today by just imagining yourself standing in a space. It could be indoors, outdoors, a blank plane, whatever first occurs to you and feels good. Once you imagine yourself there, I'd like you to take a moment and visualize an embodiment of your fear. This could look like a specific person, an animal, a shape. It doesn't really matter that much what it looks like. Just that to you, it is recognizable as an embodiment of your fear. Maybe generalizedly, maybe specifically, as it has to do with the election. Once you have that embodiment of fear standing before you in your visualized space, take a moment and ask it what it has to say to you. What message or memo or concern or interest is your fear trying to get across? Maybe it has an ask of you, a thing it's trying to get you to do or be or say. Maybe despite your ask, it doesn't really say anything back at all. There's no right or wrong way for this visualization to proceed for you. It's about giving each emotion an opportunity. About taking a moment to bring it into your imagination and perhaps into your body a little bit. And just notice. What does my fear have to say? What can I learn from it? Maybe what does it want from me? It doesn't mean you can or even ought to do whatever it's asking. But it's still information. It's still good to know, and it's still healthy to listen, even if you don't choose to act. Once you feel like you've received whatever message it is that you need to receive from your fear, take a moment to thank it and allow that image to dissipate and disappear in front of you. In its place, take a moment to imagine an embodiment of your disgust. Same as before, this could look like a person, an animal, an object, a collection of colors and lights. Whatever feels correct to you and evokes to you a certainty that you are engaging with your disgust. And just as before with your fear, take a moment to ask it. What does it have to say to you? What, if anything, is it trying to tell you about your world, your thoughts, those around you, or your environment, the media you're consuming, the way you're spending your time? Maybe it has a lot to say, and maybe it's pretty quiet. Neither thing is right and neither thing is wrong. And wherever it shows up, it's exactly as it needs to show up in this moment. It's just about bringing open curiosity to the conversation. To take a moment and listen. Again, perhaps it has requests of you. Listen to the requests with respect and compassion, even if they aren't things you need or want or ought to do. When you feel like you've listened, you've taken in, you've heard what it is that your disgust has to say, as with your fear, take a moment to thank it for all that it's told you. And then allow it to release. You may take a moment here to take 2 or 3 slow, deep breaths to help yourself be clear of the previous 2 emotions before we dive into the next one. Allow yourself to try and release whatever has come up into your body as we've been doing the exercise. A short mental palate cleanser. And when you're ready, go ahead and imagine before you an embodiment of your sadness. Taking the time to just build it and notice it in your imagination. And then listening to it. Asking it again. What does it have to say to you? What message is it trying to get across? What action or inaction is it asking you to take? And your only job here is to give it an open channel of communication and to listen with respect. You don't have to do anything it asks. You don't even have to buy into the truth of anything it's saying. You get to evaluate that later. Now is just the time to be open, to listen, to respect and have compassion for these more difficult emotions and what it is that they have to say to you. And you feel like you've heard what it is that sadness has to say, or what requests it may have to make of you. Kindly and gently thank it for all that it had to say. And allow it to fade, to dissipate, to disappear from your mind's eye for now. And finally, allow yourself to bring to mind an embodiment of your anger. Person, animal, object, colors. Just allow it to take shape in front of you in your mind's eye. And as it does so, again, check in. Ask it what it has to say to you. Ask it what it wants. Ask it what you haven't been hearing. Give it space. Give it respect. Give it kindness. And allow it a channel. As before, perhaps it has a ton to say and perhaps it says nothing. There's no correct way to be doing this or incorrect way. But for now, whatever it did or didn't say to you, give a moment to thank it and allow it to release. Allow it to disappear or to dissipate. And once again, try and bring yourself back into your body and into the room with a few slow, deep breaths. At the same time, you might want to gently do some stretches if your body thinks that sounds nice. Maybe rotating your wrists or ankles, neck or shoulders. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT and Me Podcast.